The National Desk, America's News Now. American and Mexican officials meeting for border security talks today as the largest migrant caravan in a year continues moving toward the U.S. What Mexico's president is saying. Then the latest ruling from one state on whether to keep former President Donald Trump on the 2024 primary ballot and what happens next. And promising new research shows an existing drug could serve as an effective treatment for food allergies in kids. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Eugene Ramirez. American officials are in Mexico right now to discuss border security amid a migrant surge. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, and the White House Homeland Security Advisor Liz Sherwood-Randall right now are meeting with Mexico's president and Mexico's security cabinet. A caravan of 8,000 migrants at the same time is now headed toward the U.S. U.S. officials say migrants have been riding freight trains through Mexico, hopping off just before the U.S.-Mexico border. Mexico's president says he's willing to help stem the flow if the U.S. improves relations with Cuba and Venezuela, which is where many of these migrants in that caravan are coming from. Kayla Gaskins has more.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas making their way to Mexico City Wednesday to meet with Mexico's president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. The Biden administration putting pressure on Mexico to do more to stem the flow of migrants as the U.S. deals with the surge at the southern border.
Our borders are not secure, and illegal immigration is not a victimless crime.
Former acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection Mark Morgan says a big step Mexico can take is to secure its own southern border with Guatemala.
It's an essential choke point. If you secure that, you will absolutely reduce the flow of illegal immigration.
The U.S.-Mexico meeting comes as a massive migrant caravan marches through Mexico toward the United States. The group is estimated to be about 8,000 individuals of all ages from Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. Last week, Customs and Border Protection reportedly encountered at least 12,600 migrants in a single 24-hour period, a new record.
I've spoken to these people when I've been on the river, and they're just looking for a better life. And I think that we can help them. We need more workers in the United States. And so I think there's positives that can come from immigration. We just need the infrastructure to support them.
It's a daunting task. The first 11 months of 2023 saw nearly 3 million migrants cross the southern border. That number surpasses the entire population for 17 states. The crisis at the southern border is a political weak spot for President Biden. Recent polling from Monmouth University shows nearly 70% of Americans disapprove of his handling on immigration. It's set to be a major issue heading into the 2024 presidential election. I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Developing now, the winter storm in the plains is winding down, but it's still bringing snow to some areas. Residents in parts of South Dakota and Colorado woke up to more than a foot of snow this morning. Wyoming and Nebraska and Kansas weren't far behind. Mixed rain and snow now moving further east. Rain forecast for a large portion of the mid-Atlantic and northeast through Friday of this week. And in the Israel-Hamas war, Israel continues to strike central and southern Gaza after expanding its fight against the terrorist group. As thousands of Palestinian families are evacuating today, attempting to get out of the war zone, Israel says their bombing is necessary to eradicate Hamas.
So we are trying to be as surgical as we can be in a very difficult combat environment. But once again, I stress, we don't want to see civilian casualties. And I can tell you my information is that civilian casualties are going down, and that's a good thing.
Biden administration officials met with a confidant of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday. The White House says they talked about minimizing civilian harm, better addressing the humanitarian crisis, and the future of the conflict. Taking fire from multiple fronts, Israeli military leaders say this war will go on for months, and there are growing fears U.S. troops will be pulled into a broader war in the Middle East as Iran-backed groups step up their attacks. National correspondent Audra El-Nashar has the latest on the conflict.
From the Suez Canal to Yemen to Iraq and places in between, escalations of violence between U.S. forces or allies and Iran-backed militia stemming from Israel's war with Hamas. The stakes of confrontation getting higher with news that Iran was able to triple its production of highly enriched uranium at nuclear facilities over just a few months. Over in the Red Sea, U.S. Central Command says its forces spent 10 hours on Tuesday shooting down 12 attack drones and 5 missiles fired by Iran-backed Houthis, who've been attacking commercial vessels in the key shipping route. The U.S. is juggling multiple interests here, supporting Israel's goal of eliminating Hamas, facilitating humanitarian aid to Gaza, and bringing hostages home. But another top priority is preventing a broader regional conflict from breaking out, especially one that involves U.S. troops.
And once and for all, breaking the devastating cycle of violence and moving toward durable, lasting peace.
Which seems farther out of reach with each clash with Iranian-backed fighters. Some Republicans in Congress say the president should instead order direct strikes on Iran.
They have oil fields out in the open. They have the Revolutionary Guard headquarters you can see from space. Blow it off the map. Hit them over there before they hit them us. And you don't need 100,000 troops, but you need some.
Right now, every time you hear the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, come to the mic and say our #1 goal is non-escalation or de-escalation, Tehran hears that as opportunity.
This would certainly come with risks and the potential of Iran striking back directly, not just through its proxies. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Najjar reporting.
New tonight, House Republicans are making unfounded claims that President Biden may have engaged in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. The Republican-led House Oversight and Judiciary Committees are demanding access to any communications between the White House and Hunter Biden's lawyers about his deposition in their impeachment inquiry, though they admit they don't know if what they're asking for even exists. Lawmakers say they want to know if the president was involved in his son's decision to not comply with a congressional subpoena. The Michigan Supreme Court keeping Donald Trump on the state's 2024 ballot. Now, this comes after the Colorado Supreme Court kicked Trump off Colorado's ballot because of his role in the January 6th riot, marking the very first time that the 14th Amendment has been used to disqualify a presidential candidate. The decisions are expected to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. Trump reacted to the Michigan judge's decision in a Truth Social post today, saying in part, the Michigan Supreme Court has strongly and rightfully denied the desperate Democrat attempt to take the leading candidate in the 2024 presidential election, me, off the ballot in the great state of Michigan. Special counsel Jack Smith is seeking to block Trump from making political attacks during the trial over alleged 2020 election interference. Smith filed a motion today with the U.S. District Court for D.C. requesting limits on what Trump can say at the federal trial scheduled to start in March. A new report shows one of the Republicans accused of a false elector scheme after the 2020 election regrets participating. 16 people allegedly signed false certificates to try to hand Michigan's Electoral College votes to former President Donald Trump. Well, the New York Times says 77-year-old James Renner told the state attorney general's office that he was upset that they hadn't followed the correct process. Life coach and infamous YouTube mom Jodi Hildebrandt has pleaded guilty to 4 counts of child abuse in a case that also involves her former business partner Ruby Frank. Frank pleaded guilty to similar charges last week. She used to run a YouTube channel giving parenting advice. Now, 2 of Hildebrandt's charges were dropped in a plea deal, and she will be sentenced February 20th. The woman at the center of a Hulu miniseries set to be released from prison tomorrow. Gypsy Rose Blanchard received a 10-year sentence after pleading guilty to the second-degree murder of her mother in 2016. Her mother had a factitious disorder and forced her daughter to use a wheelchair, telling doctors she was sick when, in fact, she was healthy. Blanchard has served 85% of that sentence already. A man is now recovering after being stuck inside his pickup truck for days. Indiana police say that 2 fishermen found 27-year-old Matthew Rome yesterday after a crash that likely happened a week ago. The man couldn't reach his phone to call for help. Police say the fishermen thought he was dead until he turned his head and started speaking to them. Authorities rescued him from that truck and brought him to the hospital. Coming up here on the National Desk, why a proposed ban on menthol cigarettes is so controversial and how it could affect the 2024 presidential race. Then a look at the new fees you might find yourself paying if you return gifts this holiday season. And winter's here and dangers exist. How to plan and prepare as the weather may only get worse from here. We're back in 90. As GOP presidential primaries rapidly approach, many Republicans aren't sure their votes will be counted correctly. According to a new AP poll, about a third of Republicans say that they have a great deal or quite a bit of confidence in the primary election process. 3 in 10 say they're moderately confident. 32% have little to no confidence at all. On the other hand, the poll found 72% of Democrats have high confidence in the vote count accuracy. A proposed ban on menthol and flavored cigarettes by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, was recently put on hold. Now, while the tobacco industry is celebrating that delay, public health advocates see it as a blow to a decades-long push to ban a product they say disproportionately harms communities of color. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzau with a look at both sides of this debate.
And everywhere you look, happy smokers are enjoying a new kind of filter cigarette.
Advertisements for menthol cigarettes may have looked like this in the 1950s.
Your mouth feels clean, your throat refreshed.
But before long, they looked more like this, with full-page ads featured in Essence, Ebony, and Jet magazine, and billboards popping up in communities with large African-American populations.
When the tobacco industry infiltrated our media and supported them when other corporations, other groups didn't want to advertise with Black people at that time.
Carol Magruder says it's one reason 83% of African Americans smoke menthols, a ban on the flavored cigarettes by the Biden administration now put on pause.
In the past 20 years, we've lost about 1 million Black people to tobacco-induced smoking at the rate of about 45,000 people a year.
But opponents call it government overreach and warn of unintended consequences should the ban be implemented.
I just fear that the ban on flavored tobacco, again, most especially menthol, will just add another layer of complexity to the relationship between law enforcement and communities of color.
Reverend Markel Hutchins warns it could lead to more incidents like the death of Eric Garner in 2014, who died after police put him in a chokehold for unlawfully selling cigarettes on the street. While the ban would prevent manufacturers from being able to sell menthol cigarettes, he and other critics call it a public health issue, not a public safety one.
We've got to get out of this posture of trying to criminalize or arrest our way to a more healthy or hopeful society.
Another unintended consequence could be for Joe Biden in the 2024 election. If the new law goes into effect, some warn he could lose support from Black voters. It's support that's already been declining at a rapid rate. One recent poll showing that despite an 86% approval rate from Black voters in January of 2021, it's now slipped to 60% now. I'm Christine Frizzau reporting.
An injectable drug may provide relief for children with food allergies. New research suggests that Xolair, an approved drug for asthma and chronic hives, may also protect against reactions to peanuts, eggs, milk, and other foods. A clinical trial backed by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases showed 165 children and adolescents who received injections of the drug Xolair were able to consume higher doses of those foods without triggering an allergic reaction. Now, the FDA says that there's been 82 confirmed illnesses connected to lead in certain cinnamon applesauce pouches. You're looking at them here. The agency found that lead levels more than 2,000 times higher than proposed standards in cinnamon from Negasmart. The pouches were available in the U.S. from Wanabana, Weiss, and Schnucks. Lead is toxic in any amount, of course. And new research suggests that certain low-carb diets could lead to weight gain down the road. A study published in JAMA Network Open showed that people who ate an unhealthy low-carb diet with high animal protein and fat gained weight over time compared to people eating a healthier plant-based diet. However, those who ate healthy low-carb diets did lose weight. Whole Foods frozen fish fillets are being recalled now because of an undeclared soy allergen. The recall covers the 365 Whole Foods Market beer-battered pollock and cod fillets sold between September 8th and December 22nd. People with allergies or extreme sensitivities to soy could have a severe reaction to this. If you bought these products, you should throw them out or take them back to the store for a refund. The New York Times is now suing OpenAI and Microsoft for copyright infringement. The news outlet claims millions of its articles were used to train automated chatbots that now compete with it as a source of reliable information. Now, the suit doesn't include an exact monetary demand, but says the companies should be held responsible for billions of dollars in damages, and neither company has publicly commented on the suit. Parents are a bit hesitant now about artificial intelligence being used at their children's school. Some of them are. Janae Bowens shows us now those concerns, but also the benefits of young students being exposed to AI.
So how about we ask ChatGPT to make us a list of books about volcanoes?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Jamie Barba and her husband Chris homeschool their two sons and are passionate about teaching them how to use artificial intelligence at a young age.
I think it's important for us to know what's new, what's upcoming, what other people are using.
Jamie emphasizes to her 9 and 10-year-olds that it enhances your work. It's not something that should do your work.
So if they do get to the point where they're writing papers, it can be a great research tool.
But not all parents agree. A National Parents Union survey shows 44% of parents think there are about equal potential benefits and downsides when it comes to AI tools being used in K-12 public education. In addition to cheating, skeptics warn AI may hinder development.
We don't introduce the calculator before children understand how it works, how math works. It's an evolutional tool.
Dr. Lisa Palmer, an artificial intelligence business strategist, says teaching AI to children requires carefulness.
So educators have experience helping to evolve kids' learning approach. And this is what we need to do. The same applies to AI.
Jamie says she is teaching her sons how to use AI responsibly now to hopefully help them get ahead.
Having the ability to use that tool will just further them both in their education and their ability to get jobs in the future.
The National Parents Union also found 51% of parents know little general information or nothing at all about AI. Dr. Lisa says parents must embrace this technology so their kids don't fall behind. In Washington, I'm Janae Bowens.
U.S. Federal Appeals Court has temporarily blocked an International Trade Commission import ban on the latest Apple Watch model. This ban affects the Apple Watch Series 9 and Ultra 2 and is at the center of a years-long patent dispute with medical tech company Masimo. Apple filed an emergency motion with the appeals court Tuesday after the ban went into effect. The Biden administration said Tuesday that it will not intervene. If you're an Amazon Prime customer, you're getting an unwelcome addition to your video service. Starting January 29th, Prime Video will include advertisements. That is unless you fork over an extra $3 per month on top of your subscription cost. Amazon says ads will help it invest in new content for the platform. Now, if you're returning a gift this holiday season, be sure to watch out for some extra fees. The National Desk, Angela Brown, explains these.
If you're thinking about returning a holiday gift, there may be a fee attached. A new report says that 40% of companies are charging return fees. Returning a gift can already be a headache, the packaging, the label, but now it could also bring financial pain as well.
We've become very accustomed to returning our online purchases with the growth of online shopping, but something that is very important to note is that 40% of retailers are starting to charge return fees if you are sending those products back.
Smart shopping expert Trey Bod says retailers are trying to balance their books and returns can be expensive. Logistics tech company Upturo estimates that processing a return could cost retailers as much as 39% of the original price.
In the past, you may have asked a retailer to return something, you get a shipping label, and it's very free and easy. Now you might have to pay, say, $5, $6 or more to return that item.
Retail tech company Narvar says nearly 40% of retailers are charging return fees this year. That's up from 31% in 2022. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
New tonight, China has sanctioned a U.S. research firm and 2 individuals over reports on rights abuses. China has banned the U.S. research company Karen, its director of investigations Edmund Xu, and Nicole Morgret, a human rights analyst. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the sanctions were retaliation for a yearly U.S. government report on human rights in Xinjiang. And South Korean actor Lee Sun-kyun, known for his role in the award-winning movie Parasite, is dead. Authorities say that he was found today in a car after a weeks-long police investigation into alleged drug use. Parasite was the first non-English film to win Best Picture and the first South Korean movie to win an Oscar. Tom Sanders, one half of the famed comedy duo The Smothers Brothers, has died. According to a family statement shared by the National Comedy Center, Sanders was 86 and passed from cancer. Dick Smothers, Tom's younger brother and professional partner, said Tom was at home when he passed. Coming up here on the National Desk, with dangerous ice conditions in parts of the country, first responders are giving safety advice. We'll have that for you when we return. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. From record-breaking warm temperatures creating hazardous ice conditions in Wisconsin to changes in Pennsylvania's gas tax that could bring relief to motorists in the new year, we're taking the pulse of America. We start in Ohio, where residents of one apartment building are still fighting for their belongings a year after they were evacuated.
A year later, it still feels like a nightmare.
The nightmare started 1 year ago, Christmas Day in Columbus at Latitude 525 Apartments. The reason? Unlivable conditions. They left with what they could carry, thinking they'd be back. But that day never came.
It's just one of these things that I just want to be over. But a year later, it is still stressful. It's still like you have to deal with it.
We first met Angelique Clark last March as she waited for city leaders to give her what she left behind. A year after the emergency evacuation, most of everyone's belongings sit locked up in the towers. City leaders blame asbestos for that. Clark says she received a few things recently, but nothing important.
Not a birth certificate, not a social security card, no important paperwork. My sister-in-law ashes are still there. My husband firearms.
Instead, she says she's left with trauma.
It's like PTSD. Girl, it takes you back to a mental space that you don't want to be in.
Pennsylvania motorist pockets will soon feel some relief in the new year due to a decrease in the Commonwealth's gas tax rate. According to the Department of Revenue, on January 1st, the rate will decrease from 61.1 cents per gallon to 57.6 cents per gallon, a reduction of 3.5 cents.
Any little bit helps, and gas is very expensive as is. I'll take 3 cents cheaper. That's great.
Gabby from Larksville sometimes commutes to New Jersey, and with Pennsylvania having one of the highest gas taxes in the country, she finds herself filling up across the border.
They're very blessed with the low gas prices. It hurts a lot coming back into Pennsylvania, and I see the crazy difference between the two gas prices between the states.
The decrease also impacts diesel fuel prices, which will now drop from 78.5 cents per gallon to 74.1. Brian Wanner is the president of Peters Brothers Incorporated, a trucking company. He explains how the reduction will help the business.
With the economy the way it is and the trucking industry being very challenging this past year, that's a bit of good news.
The ice is never 100% safe.
Though it's a good reminder at any time, those words are perhaps even more true now with unseasonably warm and record-breaking temperatures in northeast Wisconsin. Officials are reporting dangerous ice conditions in Shawano County. The same cannot be said in Oshkosh, where the water in Lake Winnebago looks more like what you might see in the summer. Don Herman, owner of Sunk Ice and Dive, has been in the ice fishing game for decades. He says the earlier parts of the season make for the best fishing, but from a safety standpoint, it's best to wait.
When it gets below 32, it makes ice, but it doesn't make a very good ice until we get around zero.
That's advice first responders also want to stress.
So if you're going to venture out on foot, we're looking for 4 inches minimum, carrying some safety equipment with you, which we call ice awls or ice picks around your neck, so in case you fall through, you're able to climb out, a safety rope. Telling people where you're going, and especially knowing where you're going. You don't want to go out on ice that hasn't been traveled by other people per se.
Firefighter Tyler Hillen says ice should be 5 to 8 inches thick for ATV travel and at least a foot thick for truck travel.
Still to come, the Detroit Pistons making history last night, but fans weren't celebrating. We're going to tell you why after the break. Excuse me. The Detroit Pistons have broken an NBA record for the most consecutive losses in a single season. They lost 118-112 to the Brooklyn Nets last night, their 27th straight loss. Now, the last time the team won a game was against the Chicago Bulls. That was back in October. The Hubble telescope capturing a phenomenon with Saturn's rings. Check this out. It's a photo that the Hubble took in October when the planet was about 850 million miles away. Scientists have known about the shadows on the rings, also known as spokes, but it looks like the number of spokes and the way that they look can change depending on Saturn's seasonal cycle. That's pretty cool. That's it for this edition of the National Desk. I invite you to join me tonight for the evening edition of the National Desk. Just check your local listings for the exact time. I'm Eugene Ramirez. Catch you later.